Imagine a criminal mastermind so ruthless that even the hardened underworld of organized crime found his actions extreme. Yet he was as brilliant as he was brutal. This is the story of Anthony Gaspipe Casso, a man who climbed to the top of the mafia hierarchy while leaving a trail of blood, betrayal, and millions in stolen riches. But was Casso just a killer, or could his cunning have made him a success in the legal world? Let's uncover the life of one of the most feared mobsters in history. Anthony Casso, born May 21, 1942, in Brooklyn, seemed destined for the criminal path from the start. The third child in his family, he grew up in a household that never went without, even during the Great Depression. His father, Michael Casso, worked as a dockhand in the Brooklyn shipyards but had a secret weapon, a close friendship with Salvatore Big Sal Catena, a capo in the Genovese family. Thanks to Catena's influence, there was always work for Michael, and Anthony entered a world where mafia connections meant survival and success. Michael Casso, known in his circles as Gaspipe for carrying an 8-inch lead pipe during street fights, passed the nickname to his son. While Anthony's childhood was filled with love and stability, his admiration for his father's world of respect and power drew him toward the streets. Anthony's school years were unremarkable. He struggled with subjects like history and literature, but excelled in math. Numbers fascinated him, not for their logic, but for their connection to money, something Anthony loved above all else. It was also during this time that young Anthony discovered another passion: guns. His father often took him on hunting trips in the forests of New Jersey, where he became a skilled marksman. Local dove owners even hired Anthony to shoot hawks preying on their birds. But it wasn't just target practice that thrilled him. He was captivated by the authority and respect his father's mafia friends commanded. He wanted that same power for himself. Despite Michael's dreams of seeing his son become a lawyer or doctor, Anthony gravitated toward the streets. By his teenage years, he joined the South Brooklyn Boys, a group of local troublemakers. Though not serious criminals, the gang offered a stepping stone to bigger opportunities in the underworld. At just 16, Anthony dropped out of school, and his godfather, Sal Catena, secured him a job at the docks. The fact that he was underage was no issue. A fake birth certificate ensured Anthony could work and earn a paycheck. Anthony's charm and street smarts caught the attention of more influential figures, including Christopher "Christy Tick" Furnari, a rising star in the Lucchese family. Furnari managed gambling and loan sharking operations and quickly took Anthony under his wing. Starting small, Casso collected money from bookmakers and loan sharks and managed 2 after-hours nightclubs. These roles came with their share of conflict, and Anthony made it a habit to carry a gun, solving problems with force when needed. By the spring of 1961, at just 19 years old, Anthony found himself in serious trouble. He intervened when a local thug, Bobby Bebop, harassed a young woman. Accounts differ on whether Anthony acted on his own or at the woman's request, but the confrontation escalated quickly. When Bebop shoved him, Anthony pulled a gun and shot him several times. Though critically injured, Bobby survived. This incident put a target on Anthony's back, not only from the police, but from Bobby's uncle, a captain in the Genovese family. Fearing retaliation, Anthony turned to his father and godfather for help. They decided he should lay low, hiding out at his girlfriend's family home in the countryside. Meanwhile, his father attempted to bribe local authorities to drop the case. However, the $50,000 price tag was out of reach for the Casso family. To make matters worse, Bobby and his brother began searching the city day and night, vowing to settle the score. This was just the beginning of Anthony Casso's journey into the heart of organized crime, a path that would make him both revered and feared, earning him a reputation as one of the most dangerous mobsters of his time. Anthony Casso's path was never without danger, and one particularly tense moment could have ended his criminal career before it fully began. A rival, furious over a previous altercation, stormed into a club where young Anthony often hung out. Armed with a sawed-off shotgun, He made a public display of his intentions, announcing that it was meant for Anthony. The situation seemed dire, but Anthony's father found an unexpected solution. With the help of Sal Katina, a trusted ally, he brokered peace with the rival's family. The terms? A $10,000 payment to smooth things over, and Anthony would turn himself into the authorities. At the trial, however, the rival conveniently failed to identify Anthony as the shooter, sparing him from prison. Despite this close call, Anthony was more determined than ever to climb the ranks of the criminal underworld. While his ventures were already lucrative, he wanted more. Teaming up with truck drivers, he devised a bold scheme. Drivers hauling high-demand items like electronics, leather goods, or clothing would lose their trucks to Anthony for $10,000. They'd report the theft to the police, who would eventually recover the empty truck. Meanwhile, Anthony sold the goods through his network of fences, making a tidy profit. Anthony also cultivated relationships with harbor guards in New York City. These guards, eager to make extra money, helped him move stolen goods efficiently. By 1970, Casso's success allowed him to fulfill a dream for his family. He purchased a small country house for his parents. Tragically, Michael Casso passed away later that same year, leaving Anthony devastated. To cope, he threw himself deeper into his work. Among his many ventures, Anthony led a group known as the Bypass Gang, a highly skilled crew specializing in high-stakes robberies. Their targets? Jewelry stores and bank vaults. Their methods were meticulous. They would wait for banks to close on Friday evenings and then spring into action, breaking into vaults and ransacking safe deposit boxes. Anthony believed the key to a successful heist lay in preparation, and he spared no expense on tools. He purchased advanced equipment, including a specialized torch capable of cutting through steel, and a van with bulletproof, tinted windows to ensure quick and secure getaways. The gang's meticulous planning extended to reconnaissance, often conducted over days. They'd park their van near the target and appear to leave it unattended. In reality, 2 team members stayed inside, discreetly monitoring bank employees' comings and goings, noting cars and license plates, and studying the bank's routines. Only when they were certain the coast was clear would they make their move. Anthony's attention to detail paid off. He even went so far as to purchase alarm systems identical to those used by his targets, allowing the gang to rehearse disabling them beforehand. After a robbery, the loot was carefully cataloged. Casso leveraged his connections with white-collar criminals to offload stolen bonds and stocks, while jewelers and buyers in his network provided cash for stolen jewelry without asking too many questions. The Bypass Gang's operations were astonishingly successful. Over their run, they stole an estimated $100 million in cash, bonds, and valuables, cementing Anthony Casso's reputation as a mastermind of organized crime. Did you know? One of Anthony Casso's crew members, Frankie Beans May, had a surprising connection to Hollywood. He was friends with James Caan, the actor who famously portrayed Sonny Corleone in The Godfather. Frankie often shared stories about his criminal exploits, particularly the advanced tools Casso's crew used to crack safes. These tales made such an impression on Caan that he passed them on to filmmaker Michael Mann. Years later, Mann used those insights to create the 1981 film Thief, with a lead character who bore an uncanny resemblance to Anthony Casso himself. As Anthony's reputation grew, so did the trust of his mentor, Christopher "Christy Tick" Furnari. Shortly after the death of Anthony's father, Furnari handed him a critical task. One of Furnari's associates, a marijuana dealer known as Sammy the Jew, discovered that one of his clients was working as a police informant. Sammy's source, a contact within the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office, confirmed the tip, making it a serious threat. Furnari tasked Anthony with eliminating the snitch. Anthony carried out the job flawlessly, earning a new reputation, not just as a skilled safecracker, but also as a reliable killer. By the early 1970s, Casso expanded his criminal operations into drug trafficking. In 1971, through his longtime ally Vic Amuso, Anthony was introduced to Oscar, a Florida-based drug dealer. Oscar supplied marijuana from South America and even connected Casso with a fishing trawler captain who smuggled the goods. These handoffs took place at night, far out at sea, where marijuana bales were quickly transferred onto smaller motorboats. Marijuana sales brought in steady profits, but Anthony wanted more. He soon ventured into cocaine and heroin distribution. To support this growing business, he rented a warehouse in Sheepshead Bay to store his inventory. Business was booming, and Casso's success allowed him to buy 3 shrimp trawlers to enhance his smuggling operations. Rumor even circulated that Casso had purchased a Boeing 707 cargo plane to transport drugs directly from South America, though this claim remains unverified. As Casso's empire grew, so did law enforcement's interest in him. In the fall of 1972, FBI agents arrested Anthony and several members of his crew. Though Anthony quickly posted bail, the arrest was a wake-up call. He needed to know who had betrayed him. His attorney, Michael Rosen, revealed that the informant was Bobby Dineish, a minor associate who had occasionally helped the crew. Casso turned to his trusted friend, Gregory Scarpa, a notorious mobster with deep ties to the FBI. Scarpa discovered through his law enforcement channels that Dineish was being held in Topeka, Kansas. Casso sent a chilling message to Dineish, warning him not to identify Anthony in court. The threat worked. Terrified at how quickly Anthony had tracked him down, Dineish agreed to stay silent. This incident taught Casso a critical lesson. To stay ahead, he needed allies within law enforcement. Anthony soon partnered with NYPD detectives Stephen Caracappa and Louis Eppolito, who became his inside men. For a hefty price, they fed him critical intelligence, tipping him off about investigations and ensuring he stayed one step ahead of the law. Meanwhile, Scarpa continued to share FBI intel with Anthony, strengthening their bond. The two often collaborated, from hijacking truckloads of merchandise to orchestrating robberies at JFK Airport. Scarpa even offered to sponsor Anthony's entry into the Colombo crime family, but Casso declined, choosing to stay loyal to his Lucchese connections. In 1974, Anthony Gaspipe, Casso officially became a made man in the Lucchese family alongside his lifelong friend, Vic Amuso. The two joined Christopher Fornari's crew, solidifying their positions within the organization. Around this time, Casso gained another valuable contact within the FBI, an agent named Doug McCain. McCain provided Anthony with insider information about federal investigations, which Casso generously shared with mobsters from other families, further cementing his reputation as a power broker in the criminal underworld. However, Casso knew his burgeoning drug empire would eventually draw the attention of federal authorities. That reckoning began when another associate, Paul Bennett, turned informant. Bennett, a skilled engineer who had designed hidden compartments for Casso's smuggling vehicles, proved to be far less adept as a drug dealer. His betrayal would set the stage for even greater challenges in Casso's rise through the mafia ranks. Anthony Casso's drug empire faced a major blow when one of his associates, Paul Bennett, decided to betray him. Bennett was arrested while trying to sell 10 pounds of marijuana. Facing jail time, he cracked under pressure and gave federal agents detailed information about Casso's operations. Among his revelations was the identity of a fishing trawler Anthony used to smuggle drugs from Colombia. Acting on this tip, the feds informed the Coast Guard and Marine Patrol. When the trawler docked in Far Rockaway Bay and its crew began unloading, law enforcement surrounded the pier. The bust yielded a staggering 9 tons of marijuana, with a wholesale value of nearly $5 million. Furious and needing to act swiftly, Anthony turned to his FBI informant, Doug McCain, to uncover how the feds had learned about the shipment. It didn't take long for McCain to point the finger at Bennett. Casso wasted no time exacting revenge. Rather than using a hitman from the Lucchese family, Anthony enlisted Roy DeMeo, a notorious contract killer whose livelihood heavily depended on drug profits. Roy, eager to stay in Casso's favor, took care of the job. Just days later, Paul Bennett was gunned down on the doorstep of his home. But Anthony wasn't finished. To ensure there were no loose ends, he ordered the deaths of the trawler's captain and his son, who had served as the assistant captain. In Casso's mind, their knowledge of his operation made them a liability the feds could exploit. By late 1980, Christopher Furnari, then serving as consigliere of the Lucchese family, suggested that Casso take on the role of capo. He believed Anthony had earned the position through his growing influence and resourcefulness. While flattered, Casso declined and instead recommended his longtime ally, Vic Amuso, for the role. Vic's promotion marked a new chapter for the family, while Casso turned his focus to innovating his drug smuggling operations. Adapting to the changing landscape, Casso began importing marijuana through City Island in the Bronx, transporting it by truck to a Brooklyn warehouse. At the same time, he expanded into cocaine trafficking, sourcing the product from Colombia. His shipments arrived via small planes landing at private airstrips in Fort Lauderdale. For one particularly large shipment, Anthony reportedly paid the Colombians $1 million, a testament to the lucrative nature of his dealings. One of Casso's key partners in the drug trade was Gerard Papa. Gerard also had a hand in New York's construction business through Arista Windows, a company he co-owned with Peter Savino. Their firm secured lucrative city contracts thanks to the Lucchese family's control over Local 580, the union overseeing metalwork and windows. Anthony himself invested $500,000 into the business, helping Gerard and Peter set up a warehouse and renovate their operations. But Gerard's darker tendencies soon surfaced. In the spring of 1980, he murdered 2 men and concealed their bodies in the foundation of the warehouse under construction. One victim, Shorty Spiro, was a Colombo family member, and the unauthorized killing did not go unnoticed. On June 16, 1980, Gerard paid the ultimate price, killed by a Colombo hitman as retribution. Despite this, the window business thrived, generating profits not just for the Lucchese family, but for the Colombo, Gambino, and Genovese families as well. Each window installation brought in substantial earnings for the mob. Around the same time, Anthony met Murat Balagula, a Soviet immigrant who had made his fortune in the gasoline racket. When Murat ran into trouble with the Colombo family, he sought help from Christopher Furnari, offering a share of his profits in exchange for protection. This partnership further expanded Anthony's reach into lucrative rackets beyond traditional mafia operations. However, trouble loomed on the horizon for the Lucchese family. For years, they controlled Long Island's waste disposal industry. But a small, privately owned firm run by Robert Kabaka refused to cooperate with the mob. After enduring repeated threats, Kabaka turned to law enforcement for help. Seeing an opportunity, federal agents convinced Kabaka to wear a wire and secretly record meetings with mafia representatives. While Kabaka couldn't catch Salvatore Avellino, the Lucchese member overseeing the garbage racket, on tape, his cooperation led to a judge approving a wiretap on Avellino's home phone. The feds soon realized Avellino rarely used his home phone, as he spent most of his time chauffeuring Lucchese boss Anthony "Tony Ducks" Corallo. In 1983, agents installed a recording device in Avellino's car, capturing numerous conversations in which Corallo discussed the inner workings of the Lucchese family and its dealings with other mafia organizations. These tapes became crucial evidence in the Commission case, a landmark federal prosecution under the RICO Act that brought down several high-ranking members of New York's 5 families. Paul Castellano was notably absent from the courtroom docks as the other family bosses awaited trial. That would change on December 16, 1985, when Castellano was assassinated in downtown Manhattan, a story detailed in our John Gotti and Salvatore Gravano videos. As these mob trials loomed, Anthony Casso's Russian associate, Murat Balagula, found himself in trouble. Michael Franzese of the Colombo family approached Belagula, demanding a cut of his profits. Unsure how to handle the situation, Belagula sought advice from Casso, who brought Christopher Fornari into the fold. Fornari brokered a deal ensuring everyone shared in Belagula's lucrative fuel tax scam. Over time, this racket became one of the most profitable ventures in organized crime, second only to drug trafficking. Belagula, feeling untouchable as Brighton Beach's most powerful figure, underestimated a new threat. Vladimir Reznikov, a fearsome enforcer from the Russian underworld, decided to challenge his authority. On June 12, 1986, Reznikov stormed into Belagula's office, wielding an AK-47. He opened fire, killing one of Belagula's associates and injuring others. The chaos didn't end there. Reznikov later confronted Belagula at the Odessa nightclub, pointing the rifle directly at his head. He demanded $600,000, threatening to wipe out Belagula's entire family if he didn't pay up by the next day. The encounter left Belagula so shaken he suffered a heart attack. Despite his condition, Belagula managed to relay the situation to Casso, who viewed the threat as a personal insult. Casso reassured Belagula, requesting a photo of Reznikov. The next day, as Reznikov arrived at the Odessa to collect his money, Belagula was nowhere to be found. Frustrated, Reznikov headed to his car. Just as he opened the door, Casso's men, Anthony Center and Joey Testa, both veterans of Roy DeMeo's crew, eliminated him with a hail of bullets. Meanwhile, the Lucchese family faced its own trials. Family boss Tony Corallo, fully aware the government aimed to lock him up for life, began considering his successor. Despite being a natural choice, Casso declined the position, instead recommending Vic Amuso for the top spot. Amuso became the new boss, with Casso stepping in as consigliere. Christopher Fornari, Casso's longtime mentor, was also convicted, and leadership of his crew passed to Peter Fat Pete Chiodo. As John Gotti rose to power in the Gambino family, Vincent the Chin Gigante, boss of the Genovese family, sought revenge for Castellano's murder. After several failed attempts to assassinate Gotti, Gigante turned to Casso for help. Casso devised a plan to take out Gotti using explosives, a bold and unconventional move for the Mafia. With the help of Gigante's bomb expert, Herbie Pate, Casso planted a device under Frank DeCicco's car. DeCicco, a Gambino family underboss and Gotti loyalist, was supposed to be traveling with Gotti that day. On April 16, 1986, the bomb detonated, but Gotti wasn't in the car. DeCicco died in the explosion, and the assassination attempt on Gotti failed. Later that year, Casso narrowly avoided becoming a victim himself. James Heidel, working under Gambino capo Angelo Ruggiero, led a hit team targeting Casso. Although Ruggiero denied Gotti's involvement, rumors swirled that the attempt stemmed from Casso taking too large a cut of the heroin trade. Heidel and his team faced a daunting task. Casso's deep connections within the Mafia, law enforcement, and the FBI made him a difficult target. After weeks of searching for his address, the hitmen learned that Casso would be meeting an associate at the Golden Bull restaurant to settle a dispute over stolen bonds. The plan was to strike when Casso exited his car. However, their attempt was foiled. On that quiet Sunday evening, the street was nearly empty, allowing Casso to notice a suspicious vehicle. He spotted a shotgun barrel emerging from a car window just in time to duck for cover. Before he could grab his gun from under his seat, the would-be assassins fired, but their shots missed their mark. Casso's near miss only solidified his reputation as a man who was nearly impossible to kill, a fact that would haunt his enemies for years to come. Although wounded, Anthony Casso managed to escape his car and dash into the nearby restaurant. His would-be assassins, having struggled to open their car door, were delayed just long enough for their target to get away. Casso was left questioning who might have ordered the hit. He had plenty of enemies, but the amateur nature of the attack puzzled him. Why had such an important job been handed to inexperienced gunmen? Determined to find answers, Casso quickly recovered from his minor injuries and launched an investigation. His first stop was Gregory Scarpa, who revealed that the man behind the botched hit was James Idell. Casso recognized the name but didn't know much about him. Thanking Scarpa, Casso turned to his FBI informant, Doug McCain, for more information. McCain confirmed that Idell had ties to the Gambino family through his great-uncle, Daniel Marino, and even provided the address where Idell was staying with his mother. With this lead, Casso enlisted two corrupt police officers, Ippolito and Caracappa, to apprehend Idell. On October 18, 1986, Idell was kidnapped, stuffed into the trunk of a car, and taken to one of Casso's safe houses. There, under a brutal interrogation, Idell spilled everything. He named everyone involved in the assassination attempt, including Angelo Ruggiero, as well as others in the car that night and those waiting as backup. Idell's confession convinced Casso that John Gotti himself was behind the attack. Casso decided to stage a trial of sorts. He invited Gotti and Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano to hear Idell's testimony firsthand. Gotti refused to attend, instead sending two trusted capos, Joe Butch Corrao and Handsome Jack Giordano, to represent him. In their presence, Idell repeated his accusations. As soon as he finished, Casso had him executed on the spot. The Gambino emissaries insisted Gotti had no part in the plot and assured Casso that Ruggiero would face consequences. Despite their assurances, Casso launched his own campaign of retribution, systematically eliminating anyone he suspected of involvement. Even Fat Vinny, the racketeer Casso was supposed to meet the night of the attempted hit, wasn't spared. He was killed by Ippolito and Caracappa, and his body was later discovered in the trunk of his car. Ruggiero, however, evaded Casso's wrath. On December 5, 1989, he succumbed to cancer, sparing him a violent end. By then, Casso had much bigger problems. Federal investigators had flipped Peter Savino, a former partner in Gerard Papa's Arista Windows racket. Savino agreed to wear a wire, and the recordings he captured surpassed all expectations. Notably, Savino managed to record candid conversations with Vincent Giganti, the Genovese boss. Despite Giganti's public persona as a mentally unstable man, these tapes revealed him as a calculating and lucid leader. Casso learned of Savino's betrayal through his FBI informant, Doug McCain. Realizing the severity of the situation, Casso quickly informed Giganti of the recordings. Meanwhile, the walls were closing in. The FBI was building a strong racketeering case against Casso and his ally, Vicamuzzo. Facing imminent indictments, the two consulted their lawyers and decided their best option was to go into hiding. Their plan was to lay low, assess the evidence against them, and eventually surrender to fight the charges in court. Casso knew that disappearing would make him a top target for the FBI. His name would dominate headlines, and he would undoubtedly land on the agency's most wanted list. Before going underground, he passed leadership of the Lucchese family to Alphonse Darco and devised a communication system with his loyalists. He meticulously recorded the phone numbers and addresses of key associates across Brooklyn, Long Island, and the Bronx. Through this network, Casso intended to maintain control from the shadows. By May 1990, Casso left New York, heading to northern New Jersey to hide. 2 weeks earlier, Amuzzo had relocated to Scranton, Pennsylvania, where he had already purchased a safe house. Shortly after Casso's departure, federal agents raided his New York home with a warrant for his arrest, marking the beginning of a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. Anthony Casso's wife played her part well, telling the FBI that she had no idea where her husband was. Meanwhile, Casso, known as Gaspipe, was quietly managing his affairs from the shadows. Avoiding any direct contact with his family, he only sent his wife short notes every 2 weeks to reassure her of his safety, always accompanied by bags of cash. To further conceal his identity, Casso grew a beard and often wore sunglasses and baseball caps. His only regular meetings were with Alphonse Darco, whom he met in discreet public locations like malls or restaurants. Despite his low profile, Casso was fixated on exacting revenge against Peter Savino, the informant who had betrayed him. However, the FBI had placed Savino under tight security at a military base in Hawaii, making him untouchable. Frustrated but undeterred, Casso turned his attention back to running the Lucchese family from the shadows. In the spring of 1991, family member Peter "Fat Pete" Chiodo was indicted on RICO charges. Facing the possibility of life in prison, Chiodo decided to plead guilty to lesser charges, hoping for a lighter sentence. Unfortunately for Casso and Vic Amuso, Chiodo's plea implicated them both. Furious, Casso ordered Chiodo's death. Realizing there was a hit on him, Chiodo became increasingly cautious, limiting his outings and preparing for sentencing, which he thought would bring him safety behind bars. What Casso didn't know was that Chiodo had no intention of cooperating with authorities. He simply wanted to serve his time quietly. Chiodo's survival instincts kicked in, but so did his arrogance. Before fleeing to upstate New York, he stopped at a Staten Island service station to prepare his car for the long journey. Casso's men, including Darco's son Joe, saw this as their chance. However, their attempt was poorly executed. Chiodo spotted the hitmen and opened fire, but despite firing 6 shots, he missed his targets. The hitmen, however, unleashed a hail of bullets, hitting Chiodo 12 times. Miraculously, his excess weight acted as a shield, preventing the bullets from hitting vital organs. After recovering in the hospital, a furious and frightened Chiodo agreed to cooperate with the government. He became a key witness against Casso, Amuso, and other Lucchese members. Casso, enraged by the betrayal, sent a chilling threat to Chiodo. If he testified, his elderly parents would be murdered. Mafia traditions had long prohibited targeting blood relatives, but Casso broke this rule. Despite Chiodo taking the threat seriously, enrolling his family in witness protection, the Lucchese family didn't stop there. The hitmen targeted Chiodo's uncle, Frank Signorino, whose body was found stuffed in a car trunk. They also went after Chiodo's sister, Patricia Capazzo, ambushing her as she returned home after dropping her kids at school. Though critically injured, she survived, further motivating Chiodo to testify against the Lucchese leadership. Casso blamed Alphonse Darco for these escalating failures, accusing him of incompetence. By July 1991, Casso and Amuso called a meeting with their capos and stripped Darco of his leadership role, shifting control to a collective. Paranoid and increasingly isolated, Darco began to fear for his life. Convinced the FBI was his only escape, he defected and provided critical information about the family's inner workings. Simultaneously, Casso and Amuso faced resistance from Anthony Tumac Achetero, a longtime Lucchese capo who ran the family's New Jersey and Florida operations. Despite being loyal to previous leadership, Achetero clashed with the younger generation's demands for more money. By 1987, Achetero was on trial for RICO charges, but his old-school code of omerta kept him silent. When he was acquitted, Casso and Amuso saw this as an insult and launched a campaign to eliminate him and his crew. Most of Acetero's men defected to Casso's side, but 14 stayed loyal. Casso ordered their executions and sent hitmen after Achetero and his son in Florida. Familiar with the area, the Aceteros evaded capture, even using corrupt local cops to their advantage. Eventually, federal prosecutors brought new charges against Achetero, and faced with health issues, he decided to cooperate after Casso's men murdered his wife. His defection marked another major blow to the Lucchese leadership. By mid-1991, Vic Amuso's luck ran out. He was arrested in Scranton, Pennsylvania, after an anonymous tip, and was denied bail. With Amuso incarcerated, Casso assumed full control of the family, but paranoia spread like wildfire. At a September meeting, Darco, now visibly haggard, became convinced that he was next on Casso's hit list after spotting a known assassin. He fled the meeting and immediately turned himself over to the FBI. Amuso, meanwhile, languished in prison, refusing a bizarre escape plan orchestrated by Casso, suspecting it was a trap. In January 1993, he was convicted of RICO charges and sentenced to life in prison. Casso, still on the run, believed he could outlast the government's case against him. However, on January 19, 1993, the FBI tracked him down using cell phone records. Another theory suggests his downfall was due to an associate, Burton Kaplan, who inadvertently led authorities to his location. Once incarcerated, Casso wasted no time building alliances with corrupt prison guards. He attempted several escape plans, from bribing guards to smuggle weapons to plotting to overpower prison staff during transfers. However, his schemes failed, often foiled by sheer bad luck or heightened security following major events like the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Despite his ingenuity, Casso's days of freedom were over. While Vic Amuso vetoed Gaspipe Casso's ambitious escape plan, the government presented Casso with a life-altering offer: plead guilty and face a 22-year sentence, with the possibility of release in 15 years for good behavior. Despite this lifeline, Casso hesitated. He deemed even 15 years too steep and compared unfavorably to the lenient 5.5 years Phil Leonetti of Philadelphia secured through cooperation. In February 1994, Casso finally agreed to cooperate. Pleading guilty to an astounding 72 charges, he was transferred to the La Tuna prison in Texas, the very cell that once housed Joe Valachi, the mobster who had famously exposed the mafia's structure decades earlier. Yet, Casso's collaboration with federal agents quickly turned turbulent. When Casso began revealing damning accounts of corruption, like his dealings with crooked cops Eppolito and Caracappa, agents welcomed the information. However, the moment he mentioned dealings with Doug McCain or the drug transactions with Sammy Gravano, he was sharply silenced. Gravano, who had been the star witness in major mafia trials, was clearly off-limits. If Casso testified about Gravano's drug activities, it could dismantle Gravano's credibility, exposing him as a perjurer and jeopardizing high-profile convictions. Though Casso testified before Senate committees and provided chilling details of mob atrocities, investigators became wary of his utility. His status as the sole witness to many crimes undermined his credibility. Even years later, when Gravano faced charges for drug trafficking, which corroborated Casso's claims, the government remained disinterested in Gaspipe's testimony. In 1998, the government dropped Casso from the Witness Protection Program, citing his repeated violations. Observers suspected this was a convenient excuse to sever ties with him. His appeal to reverse the decision failed, and Casso was sentenced to an astronomical 455 years in prison without parole. Amid this turmoil, his wife Lillian remained a rare source of solace. Despite Gaspipe's infidelities and crimes, she refused to abandon him, raising their children alone. However, tragedy struck when Frankie Sortino of the Colombo family extorted Lillian, claiming Casso's cooperation had harmed his associates. With no one to protect her, Lillian surrendered $100,000, but was soon hounded for more. Gaspipe, powerless behind bars, desperately wrote to federal authorities for help, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. In February 2005, Lillian died of a heart attack, leaving Gaspipe devastated. Casso's health deteriorated in prison, with diagnoses of heart disease, cancer, hypertension, and respiratory issues. In March 2020, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, he was transferred to a Tucson jail and later a hospital after testing positive. Despite his attorney's compassionate release requests, he remained incarcerated. On December 15, 2020, Anthony Gaspipe Casso passed away at 78. If you've been captivated by this deep dive into the infamous life of Anthony Gaspipe Casso, there's so much more to uncover about the shadowy underworld of organized crime. Hit subscribe to Inside Secret World of Mafia Titans for gripping stories, exclusive insights, and untold truths about the most powerful figures in Mafia history. Don't miss out. Join our community of true crime enthusiasts today.